3 years after marriage. James openly embraces and kisses his mistress in front of me. He even proudly shows off to his friends. Look, how tolerant my wife is. I maintain a calm expression. My heart is completely unperturbed. He's still too young. He's no match for me at all. His eyes turned red with anger. I helplessly smiled and said to James, "Can you be generous just this once? I had just finished work." James' call came in. He said, "Emily, my mom insisted I call a few more times before she'd come pick me up. I'll give you 10 more minutes." Before the call ended, sounds of clinking glasses and women's laughter came from the receiver. 15 minutes later, I pushed open the door to the VIP room. I saw a row of female attendants in short skirts. The men's gazes moved back and forth among them. A woman's voice sounded impatient. "Who is this? Why are they so inconsiderate? Why did you come in without changing your clothes? Oh dear, it's Emily, you look so tired. I almost didn't recognize you." Sophia is James's mistress. She has always looked down on me. I was dragged around for fun all night last night. My back and waist hurt when I woke up this morning. I don't have time to deal with her right now. He's standing at the door. His face has no expression. He asked, "Can I leave now?" James heard the sound. He looked up. Frowning, he pointed to his watch. "Emily, you're late." Sophia raised an eyebrow. She said with a smile, "Emily, being late comes with a penalty. You know, there are quite a few bosses present today. Why don't you drink a few glasses with them? You can choose to self-penalize with 3 drinks, or go change into a more suitable outfit for women." I leaned against the door. I casually glanced at him. "I have to drive. I can't have a single drop of alcohol." The atmosphere in the private room became tense. Sophia seized the opportunity. "Keep stirring up trouble. Aunt Emily, so many guests are waiting. You wouldn't want to embarrass James, would you?" I coldly said to her. "With you around, is there still a need for me?" Sophia is a rising young actress. Her talent is outstanding, especially after working with James. Her acting career has been even smoother. Sophia hadn't even had a chance to react. James stepped in to defend her first. "Emily, don't go too far. Sophia is allergic to alcohol. Allergic to alcohol. What a joke. 6 months ago, I saw Sophia get drunk at the bar entrance with my own eyes. She was taken away by someone. I casually glanced around the private room. Suddenly, I met a gaze. It was Daniel, the little dog I cruelly left behind. When our eyes met, his eyes were filled with grievance and defiance. It felt like he was silently accusing me of being cold-hearted. All right. It was my fault. I feel guilty inside, after some thought. I raised my eyebrows and smiled. Okay then, I'll go change my clothes. I took off my suit and trousers. I chose to wear a black satin slip dress. The person in the mirror, with bright eyes and white teeth, with a distinctly curvy figure. My skin is fair. My lips are rosy. With long legs, I looked radiant overall, full of confidence when I appeared before everyone again. Everyone was captivated by my appearance. James seemed to have never seen me dressed like this. He was momentarily stunned. He looked a bit surprised. Sophia's eyes revealed a hint of obvious jealousy. She has always maintained the image of the girl next door, but she didn't realize it. Cuteness seems powerless in the face of sexiness. I looked around. To my surprise, Daniel was sitting in the main seat. This must be an occasion specially arranged by James to sign him. This young man is the 2nd generation of the Daniel family. He entered the entertainment industry to pursue his dreams. Thanks to the influence of his uncle Michael, he received top resources right from his debut. I slowly walked up to Daniel. I looked down at him. Then I raised the juice in my hand. "Daniel, I just opened my mouth before I could finish my sentence." He instinctively wanted to kneel down. Just as he was about to say those 2 words, I quickly stuffed a grape into his mouth. Then, I wrapped one arm around his neck. Leaning close to his ear, I whispered a laugh. "Only the 2 of us can hear it. Don't say anything more," he quietly reminded. "Be quiet. Don't let me slip up." The little puppy immediately quieted down, standing there at a loss. I took the initiative to get closer to him. This might be something he never thought of. To perform the act well, I clinked glasses with him, still smiling on my face. "Daniel, I used tea instead of wine, a toast to you." Daniel's eyes turned red, struggling to hold back the discomfort inside. He finished the drink in one gulp. His voice was a bit hoarse, with a hint of trembling. "Okay, I'll be relying on you from now on. Sister, look, so obedient. It's all because I taught too well in the past." James saw this scene from a distance. His expression didn't look too good. He stood up to speak. "Emily, come out for a moment. You don't seem very happy." Does he know that I'm not happy? It's only been half a year since we got married. I found out he's been flirting with the female artists in his company. He even tried to argue his way out of it. He said, "What man doesn't have a little fun outside these days?" I asked him if that meant I could also play around. James just laughed when he heard that. He said with my strong personality, which man would be interested in me? Look, he really is an arrogant person. He may not understand. I'm never short of admirers around me. I hadn't even had the chance to speak. Sophia beside him softly said, "James, I'm feeling a bit unwell. Can you take me home first?" James frowned. Clearly, he was too busy to pay attention to his partner. My phone suddenly lit up. Someone sent me a text message. "Where are you?" Looking at the innocent side profile of the puppy, I suddenly felt a bit guilty. I quickly replied to him, "What does this have to do with you?" 3 seconds later, someone sent a message. I opened it to take a look. His veins on the abs were clearly visible. I quickly shoved my phone back into my pocket. Fortunately, I didn't open it. Otherwise, with his style, who knows what strange things would pop up. Daniel might have noticed that I was a bit impatient. He coughed lightly. I also feel a bit drunk. Let's just leave it at that for today." After I watched those two walk away, I turned around and bumped into Daniel. There was no one else around. He gently pulled my sleeve. He said in a low voice, "Big sister, I miss you so much." I closed my eyes, quietly pulled my hand back. I said coldly, "Don't come looking for me again. You know that I'm already married." The night before I married James, I confessed everything to Daniel. He said he didn't want to get involved in someone else's relationship, so we parted ways like that. But less than half a year later, he regretted it. She fought to become the third party. It caused quite a stir. Almost everyone knew about it, but I didn't want to get entangled any longer, because a more troublesome person appeared. Daniel looked a bit pale. He was silent for a long time. Finally, with red eyes, he spoke softly. "Sis, please don't go, even without a title." "I would be willing," he said. I immediately interrupted him. "You would be willing, but have you thought about whether your partner would agree?" I said to Daniel. "Focus on your acting, be obedient." After saying that, I turned and left. I didn't look back at him. It's not that I'm heartless, but this little pup doesn't understand the situation at all. I rented an apartment near the company when my mother-in-law doesn't come to check. I live here. So does James. That so-called home has long been a mere formality. On the way home, it suddenly started pouring rain. It's really annoying. When I got home, I saw a familiar figure from afar. Speak of the devil. That's the little pup's uncle, Michael. A tall, slim guy standing in the misty rain at 6'3". His eyes fixed on the falling raindrops. Raindrops dripped from the tips of his hair, sliding down his chiseled face, finally flowing into his half-open collar. He looked particularly casual. There was a sense of freedom about him. It seemed he noticed something. He turned his head to look at me and asked, "Where have you been?" I glanced at his translucent shirt. I found a bite mark on my chest from last night. It took a while before I managed to say something. "What are you doing here?" Michael slowly blinked. His voice had a lazy tone to it. "Listening to the rain." I curled my lip. I walked around him to open the door. "Oh, well, Michael, take your time listening. I won't disturb you. I was just about to step inside." Suddenly, I lost my balance. I fell backward. At that moment, a long arm wrapped around my waist. I could hear the man's deep breathing beside my ear. He said, "I missed you." His voice carried a softness that was unusual for him. It was completely different from his usual cold demeanor. This contrast made me very happy. I wasn't sure how long he had waited. All I felt was a chill on my back. I cleared my throat softly. "Come in." The person behind only briefly replied with a no. I don't have time to get entangled with him. I glanced sideways and shot him a fierce glare. After a while, Michael rested his head on my shoulder. He looked a bit unhappy. He spoke slowly. "Emily, I drank a lot of alcohol. Now my head really hurts." He lost his senses after drinking. I remember Michael rarely drinks. The only time he drank a lot was 2 years ago. That time, we both ended up in the hospital. Looking back now, I still feel a bit scared. He needs to vent, and I am tacitly allowing it. I have an indescribable fondness for him, perhaps because we are similar people. As for how that old man in Michael's family forced Michael's father to death back then, no one knows anymore. Raising a tiger brings disaster. That saying is absolutely true. Everyone says Michael is ambitious. He doesn't even acknowledge his relatives. No one knows how much hardship his mother endured in the Michael family. In the end, she passed away with resentment. Michael is not the biological son of old man Michael. Many complicated matters have occurred in the wealthy family. Every scar on him represents an experience. I asked him, "Do these scars hurt?" He said, "Pain makes the memory clearer." I took a deep breath. I urged softly, "Hurry up." Michael was momentarily taken aback. It seemed like he was deep in thought. Then he picked me up in his arms after entering the house. I casually threw him a towel. "Go on. What do you want from me?" Michael didn't dry his hair. He just quietly stared at me. "It's about the contract renewal." "So that's what it's for." I signed a 2-year contract with Michael. "The terms are somewhat unfair to me. After midnight tonight, the contract will expire. We were just using each other. I've gotten what I wanted. There's no need to renew the contract, but I can't just say it directly, because I can only be free in half an hour." The man's expression suddenly turned grim. I hadn't had the chance to speak again. He had already tightly grasped my wrist. Suddenly, my phone rang. Michael glanced at the caller ID, his eyebrows raised slightly. I frowned. I looked at him. James was impatiently asking on the other end of the line, "Emily, where have you been?" Michael noticed my confused expression. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. He leisurely ran his fingers through his hair. Faced with James's aggressive attitude, I answered him honestly. "Me, you might want to ask, Michael." James was taken aback for a moment. Then he couldn't help but laugh. "Emily, what are you thinking with your status? How could you dare to have inappropriate thoughts about Michael?" My eyelid twitched suddenly. James's PUA skills have always been impressive. He let out a cold laugh. Then he said, "Furthermore, do you still remember that young guy? That's his nephew. He will definitely come to trouble you." I closed my eyes. That's right. He not only knows, but he was the one who personally took that person away from me. We were just one step away at that time. I didn't expect a good uncle to pop up halfway. He's not an interesting person. The only 2 people who had conflicts with him still have contact. I took a deep breath. I said seriously, "Is there anything else? If there's nothing, I'll hang up." The conversation isn't over yet. Michael suddenly spoke up. James was taken aback. Before he could react, Michael had already hung up the phone directly. I looked at the clock. It was already 12:01. I slightly struggled to break free. He furrowed his brows. "What's wrong? Not happy? I'll get dressed." Act as if nothing happened, smiling charmingly. "Michael, it's already 12 o'clock. Let's go home." Michael's clothes are a bit messy, lying in the spot where I just was. His chest rises and falls rapidly. Stopping suddenly halfway is indeed uncomfortable. I cleared my throat softly. "Go ahead. Just bear with it, it will pass. If it really doesn't work, then just hold on for now." Michael straightened up, almost laughed out of anger. He asked Emily, "What makes me any less than him?" It's the first time I heard him say something a bit jealous. It surprised me a little, but I still calmly said, "Michael, I have said this long ago. Our personalities don't match. There won't be any results. To say is to do. This is basic integrity." When I got home, James was indeed waiting for me on the living room sofa. He had a sullen expression. It looked like he wanted to settle scores with me. "Emily, was that guy Daniel?" I helplessly answered truthfully. "I already said it was Michael." "You still don't believe me," James said through gritted teeth. "Emily, are you overthinking this? The Michael family has strict rules. The hierarchy is clear. I don't think highly of you either. How could Michael possibly be interested in you? He must be really upset." He spilled out all his thoughts. "He thinks I'm not good enough." "That's right. He has always looked down on me. My marriage with James is a business arrangement. The Emily family cannot compare to the James family. He always thinks he is better than me. Moreover, he later found out that I am not a true heiress. He thought that if I left him, I wouldn't be able to live. So he is unwilling to divorce those women around him. It's all a tactic he deliberately used to irritate me. The parents from both sides don't care much about this matter. I can only find a way myself. However, I'm not satisfied with the little property after the divorce. The things I got from Michael gave me enough confidence. I took a deep breath. I smiled and threw the signed divorce agreement in front of him. "Just right. I don't think much of you either. Let's get divorced quickly." James's expression darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Emily, don't you regret it?" After saying that, he slammed the door and left. He probably hasn't figured it out. I have insisted for so many years without thinking about divorce. Yet I decided to divorce because of a stranger. I made up my mind to get divorced. Why is that? Could it be that I've really found true love? James dislikes this idea the most. He has always believed that I can't live without him. The Cold War lasted for a few days. James occasionally sends over some trivial messages. he said. "Emily, I'll give you a chance. If you admit your mistake, I'll pretend nothing happened. You know that after leaving you, I end up with nothing, right? Do you understand what it means to leave with nothing? Emily, you have worked unpaid for our James family at Star Entertainment for so many years. Are you really willing to leave? He only talks nonsense. He is always reluctant to sign the divorce agreement. There's nothing I can do. I have to hire a lawyer to handle this matter, because I'm really anxious. I just didn't expect there to be an unexpected situation with the little puppy. This was supposed to be an ordinary business event. I don't know what the organizers are thinking. They specifically arranged for James to sit next to Daniel because they are far apart. I only saw James say something to Daniel. The little puppy, in front of everyone, directly threw a punch. It seems he is still not satisfied. Then he grabbed James by the collar. He slapped him again. James seemed a bit stunned from the hit. After taking 2 hits, he finally reacted and fought back. The two of them immediately got into a scuffle. Things happened too quickly. I quickly shouted, "Stop it." After saying that, he ordered all the media to stop filming. Then he ran towards them. Daniel has always been obedient. He's not the type to actively seek trouble. The only possibility is that James intentionally provoked him. The two were ruthless in their attacks. James's eyes turned red from the beating. Daniel angrily rushed in and kicked him. "James, if you insult her again, I will never let you go." James wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He said with a bitter smile, "The woman I'm tired of playing with doesn't look at you. You're so concerned about this." Hearing this, I was so angry I really wanted to go up and hit him. I never shared a bed with James before we got married. After marriage, he goes out to have fun every night. We rarely have the chance to sleep together. Every time he says he's too tired. He had never tried it before. Now he blames me instead. I saw him run over to mediate. Daniel is afraid of hurting me. He immediately stopped. I didn't expect him to be distracted. He was kicked hard by James. Daniel is holding his stomach. His face instantly turned pale. I saw Daniel getting hurt. I rushed over immediately in the chaos. Someone bumped into me. I didn't have time to dodge. I hit my forehead directly against the corner of the table. It hurt so much that I couldn't help but grunt, but James didn't stop. He grabbed a vase and threw it at Daniel. Daniel instinctively dodged. As a result, the vase flew straight at me. I had a big bump on my forehead. I felt dizzy. I completely had no time to dodge. At a critical moment, a familiar figure rushed in front of me. The vase smashed directly into Michael's chest. It instantly shattered into countless pieces. He glanced sideways at James, gave a faint smile, and said, "You dare to touch my people." This voice was all too familiar to me. Although he wore a smile on his face, he gave off a chilling vibe. The scene fell silent, so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Daniel saw someone coming, immediately felt a sense of support. He cautiously said, "Uncle." This call often clears the tension in the room significantly. The living Yama came to stand up for his nephew. As soon as James saw Michael, he felt that something might go wrong today. Everyone said Michael showed no mercy to anyone, except he was particularly protective of his nephew. Regarding today's matter, as long as he insisted that Daniel acted first, Michael wouldn't do anything to him. Michael looked at James. There was no expression on his face. He simply spoke up. "Apologize." James showed a look of surprise. Just like that, the scene suddenly fell silent. James was stunned for 2 seconds. He immediately walked up to Daniel, bent down to apologize. "I'm sorry. I drank too much and got a bit confused. I hope you can forgive me." Michael's words were not finished yet. A cold voice rang out again. James followed his gaze and looked at me. At that moment, everyone present finally realized what had happened. The person Michael just mentioned who moved against me refers to me. The audience's hearts stirred with huge waves. James looked incredulous. He was stunned for quite a while before coming to his senses. His face immediately turned red. He shouted angrily, "Emily, you." The second half of his sentence was interrupted by his own scream. A bodyguard accompanying Michael kicked him in the knee. Michael always demanded an apology from him, but the other party seemed to not understand. So someone forced him to kneel down. The Michael family's bodyguards had already sealed off the scene at some point. All the cameras of reporters and media were destroyed. This is Michael's usual style. He doesn't want his photos or videos appearing on any social media. He also won't give the media a chance to report on this matter. James understood that he was at a disadvantage today. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and kneel down to apologize to me. All of this happened in front of everyone. Michael glanced at Daniel, whose face was bruised and battered. He said, dissatisfied, "What a shame." After saying that, he turned and walked towards the door. Daniel obediently followed behind him. He didn't dare to make a sound. Just a couple of steps out, Michael suddenly turned his head and said to me, "Do you want to celebrate the new year here?" I took a deep breath and stood up while leaning against the wall. "I don't want to." Walk to the door. Daniel limped over to Michael's car. I'm holding my forehead, turned around and walked in the opposite direction. Unexpectedly, Michael said coldly, "Let the doctor take a look." Daniel honestly replied, "No need. Uncle, I'm fine." "Who asked you?" Michael interrupted him directly. He pushed me into the passenger seat. He closed the car door, stepped on the gas. The car sped away quickly through the rearview mirror. He saw the little dog looking very anxious in the smoke behind the car. Inside the car, I'm rubbing my head. Sent a message to the assistant. Daniel just joined our star entertainment and dared to directly hit the boss. If this gets out, everyone will be in trouble. After handling the matter, I finally had time to see Michael. I don't know if my eyes are playing tricks on me. I'm still not fully awake. I think I saw a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. "What made you so happy?" But today, from any angle, I should thank him for his help. So I spoke up first. "Michael, thanks to you just now." I haven't finished speaking yet. The man who was just so smug immediately changed his expression. "What did you call me?" I couldn't process it all at once. Is there a problem with calling him Michael? Wasn't that how we used to call him? Seeing my puzzled expression, Michael suddenly slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a stop by the roadside. Before I could react, Michael unfastened his seatbelt with a stern face. He leaned over towards me. His voice was cold. It seemed to carry a hint of dissatisfaction. He was willing to let me sit straight, but he was unwilling to change the way he addressed me. To sit properly, he thinks I got divorced for him. I quietly moved back a bit. I said in a low voice, feeling embarrassed, "Didn't they say that conflicting attributes are bad?" At that time, he insisted on following me. No matter how I advised him, he wouldn't listen. Later, he regretted it immensely. In the end, Michael came to find me as an uncle. I originally thought he would give me a few $100 million to leave his nephew. To my surprise, he gave me a contract instead. The amount section was left blank for me to fill in. Unfortunately, there was a conflict of attributes. I refused. Later, James's infidelity increased more and more. His behavior became bolder. Michael came to find me for the third time. I asked him, "Michael, how does it feel to be sneaky like this?" He raised his eyebrows with a teasing tone. He asked, "It's been half a year since we got married. Still feel lonely. How does it feel?" I smiled helplessly. "I find it distasteful. Is that not okay?" He spoke with hidden meaning, always holding on without letting go. "Don't you find it unpleasant? I work seriously and responsibly for the James family's star entertainment. Everyone knows about this matter. It seems like I'm under pressure, overcoming various difficulties, doing my best to fulfill my duties, just like James's bad reputation. I'm also a laughingstock in the high society circle. I haven't argued with Michael anymore. I just made him pay a significant price. Of course, this isn't about money. Michael has resources that money can't buy. I originally thought someone like him would be very busy. I didn't expect him to exhaust me so much these past 2 years. When one relaxes, the body collapses. Playing the game led to feelings. I am indeed a bit surprised. 3 days later, at a company dinner, I saw James again. In these past few days, he has been constantly texting and calling me. They're all asking the same question. "Emily, what is your relationship with Michael? When did you two start? Are you crazy? This is infidelity." I smiled a little. I didn't say anything. I completely ignored it. Sophia sat quietly next to James. She looked like she was about to take her place officially. I sat in the corner, restlessly scrolling through my phone. These past few days, that little puppy has been driving me crazy. He follows me around every day, constantly asking what my relationship is with his uncle. The key is that James hasn't signed the divorce agreement yet. Just when I was feeling irritated, James seems to have drunk too much. He suddenly hugged Sophia. He kissed her in front of everyone. After the incident, he even showed off a little. "Look, isn't my wife particularly tolerant?" Everyone's expressions were different. Only I showed no change at all. One could even say it's completely calm. I had long anticipated that this day would come. It just feels particularly unclean. It's nauseating. I stood up, intending to go to the bathroom to wash my eyes. At that moment, a cold voice came from the doorway. "If you want intimacy, go find a place outside. Don't make people uncomfortable here." Someone whispered, "Michael." This statement was clearly directed at James. Sophia, sitting next to James, immediately blushed. The room fell silent all of a sudden. Michael was wearing black trousers and a satin black shirt. That rebellious face, both handsome and carrying a hint of danger. Ever since that day, I casually made an excuse to leave. He hasn't contacted me since. Now, looking into his eyes, I still feel a bit uneasy. This is a bar owned by the Michael family. Michael might just be passing by. Did he see someone in trouble? I gave him a helping hand without thinking. I avoided his gaze. I pondered in my heart. James probably drank too much. It might also be because he lost face when he was forced to kneel last time. Maybe he even suspects that I really want to divorce him for Michael. The nature of men is revealed. He smiled at Michael. He said it deliberately. Michael is always like this. My wife is so generous. Are you a bit envious? Michael wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled. He walked straight to my side. He pulled me into his arms. I immediately realized what he wanted to do. I quickly whispered, "Don't," but it was already too late. Michael's gaze was sharp. He stared directly at James and said, "She wasn't this easy to talk to last night." He insisted on doing it again. No matter how I advised, it was useless. Everyone was stunned. Everyone seemed as if they had a stiff neck. Everyone turned their heads away, fearing that Michael would remember their faces. Michael held my hand. His fingers gently caressed, not even lifting an eyelid. He slowly spoke to everyone. "Everyone can leave now. Remember not to speak carelessly." As soon as everyone heard this, they immediately breathed a sigh of relief. They hurriedly left. After a while, only the four of us were left in the private room. I supported my forehead, feeling both angry and amused. I decided to be straightforward with James. "It's come to this. You still not want to part ways?" James clearly froze for a moment. He showed a look of surprise. He pointed at me. With a slightly trembling voice, he said, "All right, all right, all right. Emily, you're really impressive. You usually look quite dignified. Why are you now also trying to find a rich person like others? Did you give Michael something special to eat? You have his child. Last time I suffered a loss. This time, as soon as James saw Michael's bodyguard, he didn't dare to make a move again." Michael coldly snorted. "If she really is pregnant with my child, what does it have to do with you now?" James was momentarily at a loss for words. Sophia lay listlessly on the sofa. Seeing an opportunity to perform, she quickly supported James. She said flatteringly, "James, don't be angry anymore. It's bad for your health. Having one more person in the James family doesn't make a difference. Having one less person also doesn't make a difference. Isn't it just dealing with a public relations crisis, making it seem like you're the chairman? James, you wouldn't be reluctant to part with her, would you?" James visibly froze at this remark. I glanced at his expression. It seemed like he was a bit reluctant, but not by much. But there isn't much. It feels more like jealousy or surprise, so I took advantage of the opportunity. She quickly took out the divorce agreement and resignation letter from her bag and pushed them in front of James. She thought to herself, in this situation, James would definitely sign it for the sake of face. He would grit his teeth and sign. But unexpectedly, James held back for a long time. In the end, he only said, "Wife, stop messing around. It's my fault. Isn't my apology enough apology?" James actually apologized. How silly and naive. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "You think an apology will make me forgive you?" James's face suddenly turned pale. "Emily, don't be ungrateful." Before he finished speaking, a bodyguard quickly splashed a basin of water on James's face. She took out a cloth and helped wipe his face. She said, "Michael always said, if you have a foul mouth, you must wash it often." Michael looked indifferent. I can't see any emotions. I'm too lazy to say much to James. He just stood up and walked away. All these years, he's used women to make me uncomfortable. I've long since gotten used to it. I also have a way to make him sign the divorce agreement. Back home, I started packing my luggage, looking at this place called home. Surprisingly, I don't feel any sense of nostalgia at all. The next day, James was rarely sitting in the living room waiting for me. There was a steaming breakfast on the dining table. He had a smile on his face that I didn't quite understand. He was as warm as if we had just met. He said, "Wife, come, have a cup of warm water first. I didn't know what you liked to eat, so I made a bit of everything." Seeing my confused expression, he paused for a moment, then sincerely explained, "I didn't poison it. I genuinely want to make up. Emily, these years, I've let you down, but I broke up with Sophia yesterday. I thought about it all night. I feel that we shouldn't get married after all." I smiled at him. I asked casually, Don't you know that Sophia is pregnant?" As soon as James heard this, his face immediately turned pale. He froze in place, not moving at all. He has issues with fertility, so he never uses protection when he has relations with women. Maybe it's because James's family doesn't want their lineage to end, so they turn a blind eye to James's infidelity. Because of this, James definitely wouldn't give up a child for me. I've been with James's family for so long. Finally discovered his biggest weakness, but he doesn't realize it. Sophia is actually part of my plan. She is greedier than the previous women and more daring. What she wants is not just fame and fortune, but to become Mrs. James. That day, James and I finalized our divorce. The next day, Sophia couldn't wait to announce the news. When I went to the office to pack my things, Sophia deliberately posed in front of me. She said, "It's pitiful to be getting old, lost your job and didn't take anything with you. What do you have to compare with me now?" I lowered my head, hiding the smile in my eyes. I said calmly, "I'm not going to fight anymore." I finished packing my things and prepared to leave. Sophia suddenly turned and blocked my way. Then she said, "Don't think you can turn things around. What I have in my belly is much more important than you." I smiled at her, nodding to show agreement. "Yeah, you're carrying a dragon's offspring now. You must take good care of it." Sophia couldn't smile. She said fiercely, "Don't think everything is fine just because you have Michael backing you. You're just a pitiful creature no one wants." I squinted my eyes. He leaned close and said with a smile, not leaving anymore, "Don't blame me for sending James the video of you playing with others." Sophia's face turned red all of a sudden. She is now Mrs. James. She is particularly concerned about her reputation, but I really don't have time to deal with her trivial matters. After the game ended, I was eager to wrap things up. I felt she talked too much during that time. James frequently cheated. I was also troubled by it. I originally thought an ideal marriage in a wealthy family would at most be polite interactions. But the reality is, I had no one to rely on. This forced me to work hard at Star Entertainment. I thought my plans would take many years to achieve. I unexpectedly ran into Michael. The next day, Star Entertainment held a shareholders' meeting for the entertainment division. James arrived late. He saw me sitting in his chairman's seat. Before he could say anything, his assistant looked pale. He stammered as he reported to him, "Boss, not madam. It's Miss Emily. She owns shares in Star Entertainment 72. What does this mean?" "It means I am now the one in charge of Star Entertainment." James rebutted in disbelief. "Nonsense. How could she quietly buy shares of Star Entertainment?" The assistant handed over the transaction records from these years. Over the years, I bought quite a few shares in the secondary and tertiary markets and signed 6 betting agreements at the same time. I persuaded each small shareholder one by one. None of this would have been possible without Michael's strong support behind the scenes. James read through it, trembling. His eyes were filled with fear. Star Entertainment is the economic pillar of the James family. Now it was completely ruined by him. He looked up and saw my indifferent gaze. He collapsed helplessly onto the ground. He suddenly looks much older. Given my personality, I definitely won't let those two off easily. Right when Sophia was showing her belly, the day after proudly marrying into the James family, I anonymously sent a paternity test as a congratulation. At that time, while she was dating James, she also had a few affairs with a not-so-reputable director. The child's identity is already clear. James was extremely angry. He almost called off the engagement. Sophia cried as she explained to him. She said she was sincere. But what good is that explanation? The James family is extremely disgusted with her, even more so than their disdain for me as a fake heiress back then. The identity of Mrs. James she always longed for has now become a cage that suffocates her, indeed. Back then, I clearly did nothing wrong, yet I was still found guilty. Fortunately, Sophia is not someone easy to deal with. She used various methods. She cried and caused a scene. She even threatened to kill herself. Since she married into the James family has never had peace. This is quite good. I'm very satisfied with this outcome. My series of actions left everyone around me dumbfounded. Some even said I was ruthless. All sorts of rumors spread everywhere. Some said I turned love into hate. Others said I found a new wealthy man. Only that person, who is similar to me and works with me, has been praising me. Michael has invested over $1 billion into my Star Entertainment company in the past 6 months. However, perhaps to avoid unnecessary suspicion, I haven't seen him for almost 6 months. Later I realized he had done a lot behind the scenes to help me deal with the James family issues. He did it to help me deal with the James family's matters. He pulled a lot of strings behind the scenes. As a result, he offended some people. Now he has to spend time sorting out these troubles. It seems like he wants to keep a certain distance from me. I understand what you mean, but I haven't had a chance to thank him yet. I've heard that Puppy was also sent abroad by Michael. Suddenly, the world seemed to quiet down. Everything appeared so peaceful and beautiful, but no one expected. That day at the bar entrance, I ran into James. He had a scruffy face. He looked really unwell. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red. He softly called my name. His voice carried a hint of appeasement and humility. Emily, hearing that name, I immediately took a step back in disgust. It was really uncomfortable. Please go away. James looked awkward. He stood there at a loss. Emily, I really realized that I was wrong. Actually, I've always loved you. Emily, can I pursue you again? I rolled my eyes. I turned and walked away. No, I feel it's unclean. He shouted loudly behind me. Emily, can't you be a little soft-hearted? Have you never loved me? I couldn't help but laugh. Love, maybe at the time of marriage. I once fantasized about this word. Even if living a life of mutual respect without feelings, I could accept that. But I absolutely cannot tolerate betrayal and infidelity. I hadn't even had the chance to turn back and speak. A familiar figure appeared before me. Michael walked over. He easily put his arm around my shoulders, in a tone of tenderness I had never heard before. Wife, let's go home. I was just about to speak. He had already pushed me into the passenger seat. Still the same familiar place, but everything has changed. I lowered my head. I whispered, thanks. Michael didn't respond. He sped along the way. He took me directly back to his house. He took my hand and went inside. He went straight upstairs. We arrived at the door of a room. He stopped. The door wasn't fully closed. It was half ajar. I looked inside at the furnishings. I found toys of all kinds. It was a luxuriously decorated room. I couldn't help but frown. I sighed silently. Michael, I mentioned it before. We are all dominators. This really isn't appropriate. I hadn't finished speaking when I saw him with a cold expression. He suddenly knelt down on one knee in front of me. He looked like a devotee. He respectfully presented a collar with both hands. His gaze was so eager it seemed to penetrate my eyes. I haven't had a chance to react yet. He spoke slowly. Help me put it on.